Hi everyone. During the third day of International Jazz Platform, 3 days behind us and still 2 exciting concert evenings ahead of us. Today with one Norwegian band, Valdemar 4, and the master concert, so the concert with the faculty members, and of course the great final tomorrow with the concert of participants and the supersonic orchestra for the final, and I'm really much looking forward to it. I'm sure it's going to be one great experience and evening. And today I have the pleasure to host this panel on ecological awareness. And as many of you know, one of the horizontal values of the Footprints project is the ecological responsibility. And throughout the project, we are trying to introduce awareness, of course, but also certain practical methods to evaluate our impact, environmental impact as a music industry. And as we know, the music industry is going a series of very important changes these days due to COVID-19, but the ongoing pandemic hasn't shown anything that hadn't been there before, like climate change. Climate change has become just more visible and tangible, and so the need to tackle it. So the need is required on all levels, but without putting too much pressure on individuals, on artists, and also organizations to make huge artistic sacrifices. So it's very important to find this balance between these two issues, and we wanted to show you methods and examples how to indeed find this balance and how the tools can help you to really know where the impact comes from. So I want to introduce you to our panelists today. First of all, Pierre Dujle from Le Periscope, and yes, bravo. Garan Samu from Le Periscope as well. And Frank van Berkel from Bimhuis from the Netherlands. And Jan Ole Otnes from Nationale Jazzscene from Oslo, Norway. I would like to start with Garan, who will tell us a few words about what is the situation that we are starting with and where the urgency comes from. And if I could ask Stanisław to put on her presentation.
So hi everyone. I'm gonna start with a quick overview of a general presentation. So it's not the fun part, but it's important for everyone to understand where we stand and what are the problems globally before we can go more in details with the music sector. So the first part is about global warming, but we can also talk about global climate change in general, but global warming has reached 1 degree more, which doesn't feel so much, but it depends where you stand. In the southern countries, it's gonna be way more difficult, way faster than us in the European parts. We have released more than half of the CO2 emissions in the last 30 years, which is huge. And there has been an agreement in Paris Agreement to not go over 1.5 degrees until 2030, which actually has already been, well, I think it's in next year, it's going to be already over 1.5 degrees. So that didn't work so much. And since the CO2 is building up in the atmosphere, every time more CO2 is released, we have to actually take more drastic measures to change that. So it's important to take steps as fast as we can to reduce it, so we don't have to take the measures so difficult later on. So it's a small, I don't know if you can see it so much, but it's like where we are going right now is the black line. So it's not going well, and it's going to to be a problem. But there is ways that we can actually change that and work better in the future, and with more sustainable production and consumption, and also less, obviously. We can actually go back to where we have been by 2100, so in a few years. Just to start on the music part, we have here a carbon footprint of a tour. So it's from the Green Touring Network. Just to have an idea on the main parts of the carbon footprints of a tour. You can see the venues, it's 34%. That's something that we are going to explore later on with Pierre.
Yeah, we'll talk about the numbers definitely and what they show us.
And then it's audience travel, and the band travel is actually, well, if you take it together, one of the most important impact. So it's also something that we need to work on, and that we have been working on, and that we will explore later on. And after that, it's accommodation, promotion, and all the merchandise that you can do and sell. I think it's it's good for.
Okay, it's like a starting point. So why is it so necessary, and where we are right now, and why we have to address it like immediately and decisively these days. And of course, our improvised music sector is a system within a bigger system, but by introducing changes already at our level, we can influence the global situation as well. So yes, so I will now turn to Jan Ole from Norway. And Norway is kind of known for having high environmental standards. But you also, Jan Ole, you mentioned that there is a discrepancy between like a public awareness about the ecology and the policies that are right there, and that maybe the more grassroots initiatives could be more valid in tackling this problem in Norway. So if you could tell us a little bit about how does it look like, and especially also in the music sector in Norway.
Well, as you say, the awareness among people in Norway is quite high, especially among younger people, more than the elder, more among the left side politicians than on the right side. 2 weeks ago, the EU presented a new strategy, and it's quite radical compared to what's happening in Norway. A Norwegian politician says this is not realistic. This is too much of a thing. So that's where we stand right now in Norway. We have had for 8 years now a conservative government, even with a right-wing party on it. They don't believe in climate changes. We should send them to Germany and to China now to see what it is. But they are still denying that climate change is an issue. And part of the Conservative Party, who has had the Prime Minister, talks the same way. So they have a lot of good intentions, but it's a lot of blah, 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 so to say. We have a different situation in Oslo. We have had the government there, a local government, for 6 years now. The Labour Party, a Socialist Party, and the Green Party. And they have done a lot to change the situation in Oslo. They have a plan now to get rid of all cars within the city center in a few years. They are building a lot of bicycling tracks in and out of the city, and a lot of other measures. So the situation in Oslo, as a big city in Norway, and in many smaller cities, are much more different than on the national level. On national level, they still want to drill for more oil. We don't need it, but they still give new fields in areas where the fisheries are so important. And there are protests, but they still give out these fields to dig for more oil. So that's the situation on the national level. One nice aspect that has been very interesting the last few years is electric cars. In 2021, 90% of cars sold in Norway were either full electric or hybrids. 55% electric and 35% hybrid. And that's a good situation. The bad situation about that is there is not enough charging places for these cars. But they're working on that as well now. But it's coming up. When it comes to the music sector, there is no official policy on this. I am on the board for the Arts Council in Norway and also on a committee funding festivals and venues. And in 2018, the yearly conference for the Arts Council had the name, The Last Act, Art and Culture in the Time of Environmental Crisis. So this led us to set aside €1 million to initiatives to have focus on
environmental responsibility
issues, yes. And we also have €500,000 for to support venues and festivals to make travel and other issues possible. So, and all the subsidies we hand out, we encourage the applicants to have a focus on this. So the Arts Council have done some, but not the Ministry of Culture.
So these are more like the grassroots initiatives as well. And you mentioned this grassroots certification process, which is called Green Lighthouse. Am I correct?
Eco-Lighthouse.
Eco-Lighthouse. That institutions and organizations can enroll to, right? And they have to comply to certain rules and regulations, and it is renewed every year. So, what is the Eco-Lighthouse?
It's a kind of administrative management system for institutions, all kinds of businesses, and also events. So they started up in 2002, and now it's 7,000 different businesses that have got this certification. And then you apply for it, you get a kind of supervisor to go through your business to see where can you do measures to be certified, get the certification.
You can audit something like that, right? Mm-hmm.
So when I was in Molde, the Molde Jazz Festival, we applied for this in 2006 and got a certificate. And every third year, you have to reapply to check that you have done what you got the certificate for.
Mm-hmm. And Nationale is also a member?
No, we are working on that now.
You're working on it right now.
So around 50 festivals and cultural events have this certification via Eco-Lighthouse.
Yeah,
I can say a little bit more about it later.
Okay, and this is very interesting to hear about these initiatives that are going from the people, and then they are maybe they will become policies in the future, but this is where they come from, and that the individual organization and institutions are joining in because they realize the importance of it. And Frank, you represent an institution, an organization, and yes, we will talk a little bit. Yes, that the technical preparation, the BIM House institution from Amsterdam, from the Netherlands. And Stasio, can I ask you to put on the photo? And it's an organization which, from the very beginning, put a huge emphasis on their ecological standards, and you're trying to keep the ecological standards very high, which concerns the building itself, but also its maintenance and organizational aspects. So, if you could tell us a little bit about BIM House in terms of their ecological standards.
Yeah, okay, I'll try to briefly tell something about this beautiful building. We are very proud of it. So this is what you see here is the Muziekgebouw and the Bimhuis. The Bimhuis is the jazz venue, and the Muziekgebouw is the contemporary music venue, which is quite bigger than the Bimhuis. Bimhuis has a capacity of 250 seats, 150 standing, so 400 people we can have in the club. And the Muziekgebouw has a bigger room. It has seats for 700 people, and it's a bigger stage for large ensembles. And it was built in 2005, this building, so it's more than 16 years old now. And we have a BREEAM certificate for this building, which means it's a building research establishment environmental assessment method. And it's the proof that this building is being maximum sustainable. I have to read it from this. And it has a minimum impact on the environment, at least built in 2005, and a green and healthy workspace. What I can say more about the building. We have the two venues, including the offices, and also in the Muziekgebouw there are a lot more offices for festivals and ensembles which are housing there. It was supported by the government in 2005, so the maintenance of the building, there is a foundation which takes care of the maintenance of the whole building, which is called the BAMB, B-A-M-B. And there's a board of directors, a board of this foundation with the directors of the Muziekgebouw, the Bimhuis, and also there are 3 independent real estate professionals in this board. So they really can take care with lots of knowledge about this building. And this foundation takes care of the IT of the building, so all the computers and the networks, the security, the cleaning, the maintenance, and the ecologic footprint and sustainability. So there's a special heating system for the whole building with water pipes through the ceiling. And there's a cooling the building produces. The cooling, the building is cool. It's difficult for me to explain because it's quite a technical story. But we have in the building, we have the heating and also the cooling coming from the ceiling. And in the summer, it feels like an air conditioning, and in the winter, it's a heating. And actually, the water of which you see here, it's called the A. It's connected with the canal to the sea and the harbor. And through water pipes, the water is cooled and heated through the use of this water and with the reservoir inside here. I don't know the technical details.
Yeah, but the general idea, right, is that the standards that were introduced in 2002, they were already very high for this year and for the knowledge and for the IT that you had at that time. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. This heated water is stored inside the water there, and is used again. So it's recycled. We also have a waste separation in the whole building, in the restaurants, in the offices, and we separate paper and glass, etc. And then we also have LED lights in the whole building and also in the theater lights, which saves a lot of energy, of course. Still, the strange thing is that it seems to only save 15% of the total energy. But still, that's quite something. So that's through the whole building. I told you about the BREEAM certificate. I can also show you this is on top of the roof with the alderman from the city council and one of the directors of the Muziekgebouw with the solar panels, the solar cells. This is on the roof of the BIM-huis, and you look out over the city. We don't have a helicopter platform, but we have solar cells. Here you can see them more. So we are proud of that. Actually, that's quite new. That was not built in 2005, but it was only, I think, a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago. Yeah, right. So we are proud of that. Yeah, that's more or less about the building. I mean, I have some small details, but about paper straws, and we always have tap water instead of water in bottles. And we are still working on the, you know, the artists on the stage. They always like to drink from the plastic bottles, and we're still working on a system for to see if we can get rid of the plastic and have a recyclable way of using this water for the musicians.
Yeah, and because BIM-huis from the very beginning of its foundation has put so much emphasis on the ecological standards, that's why we also, Pierre asked BIM-huis, among others, to work on your carbon footprints calculations for the footprints project that I know you are in the process of, and we will talk about that a little bit later. So what are the factors and how is it how the process looks like? So let's go back to Garance for a minute, because Garance also is working closely with local artists in Le Periscope. And how do you think is the awareness about among local artists about the ecological things, and how you're trying to work with them on improving this aspect?
Yes, at the Periscope we have a training program for local artists to help them structure their company so they can live from their music. And we've been trying to implement awareness around ecological issues to help them get better at it. And I think with Pierre, what we've really seen is that there is a lot of awareness around young artists and the ecological issues, but also a lot of pressure for them to get better at it, and they don't have the means to get better at it because they don't have enough money to take the right, the right trains and stuff, and it's cheaper to take a van and stuff like that. And so there is a lot of pressure around that, and so they're always divided between wanting to do better things and the fact that they don't know how to. So we've been trying to help them, giving them tools to get better at it. And I think it's really important as a concert venue for us to work on that, so we can help them get better means of ecological changes. They've been really receptive about it. And yeah, I think in the future years, it will be something that has to be taken into consideration when we receive people, artists, when we are trying to help local artists to go somewhere else. I think the venues will have main parts to play on that.
And so Pierre, we will talk about your favorite topic in the world, meaning numbers. Amount de chiffres. Yeah, we talked about that there is the discussion is there is a lot of different points of view in the discussion about the ecological awareness, and there are very often a very simple solutions to this problem, and very often also misunderstandings in knowing where the real impact comes from. That's why within the project we are trying to promote this knowledge about the numbers, so know your numbers, and that will show you where the real problem lies. So if you could tell us about this aspect of the topic.
Yeah. A few years ago, if you asked me this question, I was not aware of this question. because the Periscope is a small venue. Really, it's a small club.
It's growing, right? Now it's not such a small venue anymore.
And I'm not sure the Periscope's carbon footprints is the main problem of the society for the moment. But these questions arise in the music sector, but also in the personal awareness of the young musicians, of the audience, of everyone in around. And at one point, I was scared about that because the question arrives and more, and it takes a place in the discussion instead of the music, instead of other things. So when we start to think about it and to see what is the reality of this question, not only for the Periscope, because it's a small venue, but for the sector, because we have to give answers to people, to give answers to young musicians, to give answers to the audience when they ask you about that. So at this point, in my mind, because I love figures,
No, that's
it was really important to have a first knowledge about what is the reality, what is this carbon footprint, what is this CO2 impact, how it functions. And so we looked for experts for the project, and we start to calculate everything with Garance to have the first carbon footprint calculation for the Periscope to see what is the situation. And after we ask and we look for other figures, but it's not so easy because in the music sector, we don't have a lot of calculation and carbon footprints figures to see what happened in the big festivals, what happened in the big venues or in the small venues. But after that, when we receive the first figures, maybe you can.
Stasiu? Oh, thank you.
This is not so difficult to understand the question of carbon footprints. And it's important to separate. We had this discussion about the musicians, the young musicians, or all the musicians, having a lot of questions about how they can do something, or maybe they can change their way of life. And sometimes they mixed everything between their work and their personal lives. And it's important first to say that be a musician is a work, so you have to separate, and after you have to think about your work and the impact of the work. But you are not alone as a musician to think about it. You have to ask the venues, to ask the festival, to ask the sector, what is the institutions, to ask them what is the situation. It's not only the musician as a person who is responsible, and it's really important to not put all the pressure on the musicians, and it's still it's
the musicians.
It's here, and we have to. The figures can help to have a real overview, not stress. No, of course we saw at the beginning there is a real issue, but after, okay, let's look at the issue. So this is a carbon footprint for the Periscope. As you can see, you saw the first picture with Garance at the beginning. And so the Periscope is very specific because we are in the city center and we are a small clubs. So the audience transport is not high. If you compare to all the bigger venue and if you compare to the big festivals, it will be very, very different because the public transports, it's the main impact. And for the Periscope, because our public came in subway, public transport, and by walk and bicycle, our public impact is really smaller. So you can see that, of course, after that, the second impact is artist travels. So that's why after that, when we ask us what to do, when we discuss with the team, with other partners, of course, the focus needs to be on the transport. It's interesting, the venue, energy, oh, it's French, sorry. Venue is the black one. No. Ah oui, venue, local, the blue one. So what Frank told us about what you can do on the building is it's in this part. So it's, of course it's important, you have to work on all the levels, but it's not the bigger part. And so the transport is the bigger part. Yeah, that's it. And so when you do that, the next step is to work on it and to see what we can do. And so you can focus only on one part. So for the previous campaign, for the Footprints project, we are focusing just on the artist transport. The other point for us and for a venue or for a festival is the question of the audience transport. But it's interesting to compare after to bigger events, and you know, so we have always this discussion between regular small venues and big event in the city. And if we look at the carbon footprint impact, it can be a good argument to defend small event and smaller way to do things. But that's it for the moment. For the project, we are concentrating on the artist transport. And when you do that, you can easily understand that you have to imagine the tour. So the impact could be divided by the number of concerts and the number of activities you are doing all along your way. And after, you can, of course, the flights are, the carbon footprint of the plane is incredibly high, but sometimes you have to deal with it, and after you can imagine what to do to split that impact in different activities and different things. And at the end, when you have the figures, the other question is to consider why you are doing that and why you have an impact. So that's an important question. If you have to stop everything or not, it is a solution. Some people in this discussion can say that, okay, let's stop travel, let's stop to do this kind of cultural things, but after you have to compare your footprints with what you want to do in your life, and if you want to cancel the travels, if you want to cancel the concert, or maybe you can cancel other things to balance with that.
And for the Footprints project, the artists that were selected and they are going on tour, we are also going to calculate their footprint impact. So can you tell us about how it's going to look like for them and the agents?
We will see, but the fact that we are calculating all the tours, the tours for the artist of footprints will give us figures to have a real overview of the situation. And we can, I'm sure we will realize that in certain countries it could be difficult. For the Norway, for the we had a discussion during the previous project about Ireland, for example. So you can discuss about everything, but maybe in Ireland they want to have some foreign artists, and it's difficult to go by car or bicycle to Ireland. So
you might try.
But for example, in France and for certain area in Europe, of course, you can do really clever travel and clever tour to go down with your impact. And after, when we will have a lot of figures from our sector, we will compare to the other sector. So it's not the only
just
final,
talking.
yeah, it's not to blame us every time, it's just to have the figures, and after you can compare with the others.
Yeah, because you also mentioned that there is a big political pressure, or the pressure coming from the community, for example, not to program any international artists, right? To focus on the local scene, which is important as well, but there is also this question of balance.
Yeah, it's the goal of what you are doing. Why you want to invite a foreign artist? So you have to think about it, of course. But after, when you have the figures and when you have everything in your hand, you can make your choice. And It's, I think, for me, because, but I'm sure it's the same thing for a lot of people. It's easier to have the figures and to have the reality. Not okay. It's really bad. The figures are bad. The situation going worse and worse. But sometimes it's really less stressful to have the situation in front. And if at one point we have to stop everything, we can choose to stop everything for in front of the reality.
And Jan Ole, you mentioned that Norway is on kind of an outskirts, and it is a huge challenge for Norwegian artists to, in terms of transportation and touring, so to really meet some of the standards, let's say, right? Because it's not really possible to travel so ecologically.
It's difficult, yes. I mean, we have, let's say, 180 concerts per year. 60% of this is Norwegian musicians, 40% is international. And of the 60% of the Norwegian, I guess 70 to 80% is from Oslo. So they can travel by metro or bus or local transport. To bring an international band to Oslo is 10 hours by train from Central Europe or 1 hour by plane. So if you should come to Oslo, you have to use 4 days for one show, and no one can afford that. Traveling within Norway, we are cooperating with venues in Bergen, Stavanger, Trondheim, Molde, Bodø. To go to Bodø from Oslo by train, it's 18 hours. To go to Stavanger is 6 to 7, the same to Bergen, the same to Trondheim, and to Molde as well. So making tours that can work for these kind of clubs, starting in Oslo, there is no way out of doing it by plane. Sorry to say. It will be too expensive, both for the promoters and for the band to do it that way. When we do tours in smaller areas, like the southern part of Norway, they can go by train or by bus. But if you are doing these national-wide tours, you have to do it that way. And the same bringing them into to the country.
But at one point, if you have no choice for the transport of the artist, you can work on the audience deplacement. For example,
of course,
it's always a balance. When you have the total figures for the footprints, you can balance, and with each situation, sometimes it.
Of course, and all the audience mainly come to the venue by public transportation. You can't do it by car, it's too complicated, and you don't find a place to park, and it's so expensive. So I guess 95% or 99% maybe go by public transport to come to the venue. Our problem is that we have an old venue. It was built and opened in 1915. So it's not easy to do things with it to make the footprint lower, because the owner of the building is not willing to do all the things that we want him to do. So that's a big problem. We love the place to be, but we should also love to have it made in a way that makes the footprint much, much smaller than it is now. There have been talks now for 7-8 years about doing things about the ventilation. Nothing happens. It's too expensive. We cannot do it, and it's too expensive for the owner as well.
And this challenge also concerns the export of Norwegian artists, and which relies so heavily on flying, right? So that's also kind of necessary for them to go outside of Norway to make their living, and it's a challenge for this region as well.
I mean, if you fly to Central Europe, you can go by train all over the place with short distances. So that's no problem. But getting there often means that they have to take a flight. And there has been a discussion among both the funders and the Music Norway and the Arts Council about a lot of Norwegian artists wanting to fly to Japan. Everyone wanted to be big in Japan. You don't get big there, but you can travel around and
have a big impact.
Yeah, and play for a small number of audiences and not very many shows. So there are restrictions now by funding Norwegian bands going there without having a plan that they really reach out to an audience.
And Frank, I will come back to you because you were approached by, like us, by the Footprint, being a partner, of course, as well. But we thought that it could be a good idea for Beam House exactly to do these intricate calculations. And I know that you are in the middle of this complex process. So how does it look like for you? What do you have to take into account, and how do you see the process going on?
Well, that's quite a big project, I have to say. Pierre suggested that we go back to look at the year 2019 and that we map our footprint. So looking at all movements of audience, artists, office people, everybody moving to and fro the building, and to measure the footprint. So we are looking at certain concerts. Where does the audience come from? Or is it local audience? Is it coming from outside the city? Are they coming from abroad? And the same is for, of course, the artists, you know, American artists, European artists, local artists. Actually, we noticed that many of our audience come by bike. That was actually a nice discovery. And also, you know, we have lots of local program normally. So many musicians, there are many musicians in Amsterdam living there. So they normally they would come by bike. We have lots of drum kits in the house and instruments. So you don't need to bring, as a drummer, you don't have to come by car. And you know, we have the drums in all the sizes. So that really helps. I think also this we have to measure, which drummers are using the drum kits or the house drum kits and which are bringing their own.
As well, okay.
Yeah, so...
Good memory you have to have as well, you know.
Well, I'm not sure if we can figure that out, but you know, it all counts up, of course. So yeah, it's a big project.
So it will take us a while probably to come up with the actual figures. And Pierre, so would you like to say something about the balance, about how to approach our programming to keep the high artistic values, and how we can maintain, you know, the awareness about the ecology, and how we can combine that?
Two things. First, I think it's really important to keep the artistic project and your project in front of the impact. Because, of course, you can calculate your impact and your carbon footprints, but you have to put that compared to your project, what you want to do and what is the impact. Anytime, in any discussions. After, what we try to do with Garance, when you have your actual carbon footprints, it's important that to not grow up your footprints, so to stay stable and to continue to calculate your main impact, to control that. So you can imagine to have not only a money budget, but a money budget and a carbon budget to realize what you can do. Okay, you can do this amount of international artists, but at one point you have to stop. Okay, my year I do my impact, so I have to stop that. But after that, we have to realize and to speak to the institutions and to the ministry and to the government that okay, we are working specifically on our case, but you have to look all the cases, because when you see the figures for a big variety festival with all the audience coming by cars, even by plane, and there are 10,000 people. So we are calculating, we are aware about the travels of few artists to our venue, but they are dealing with many thousand people coming to the festival with cars and planes. So it's important to do that. But we can do something for our case, not always look at the others. And after the discussion, it's important for us and, for example, for Poland and for other countries to see the situation of the networks with all the festival, all the small venues in the cities, but only the initiative in the countryside to see how you can really build tour with a lot of dates. And if you don't think only about the budget and the money for your tour, but also for the carbon impact, you can think differently if you want to add a new date on the road, not only for money, but okay, you can divide your budget of carbon footprint. And I feel it's not so difficult for the institution and for the government to put some rules on it, because it's easy to calculate, easy to control.
Yeah, I heard recently about an initiative to start a huge ecological festival by a city, so to increase the awareness and to attract like 10,000 or 15,000 of the audience to really make an impact in the long-term perspective. So yes, these are the actions of some of the governmental even institutions. Yeah, that's why it's so important to know your numbers. Yeah.
I just wanted to add to your story. In the Netherlands, actually, and also with the Belgians, we work a lot together with the venues and the festivals. When groups are touring from America or abroad, you know, we try to bring them around. We have they play at least 3 or 5 times in the Netherlands. You know, they don't just come up and down for one show at one festival, one venue, but preferably do 3 or 5 venues in one weekend.
Jan-Ole, you would like to add something? Okay. Garros?
Yeah. I think we have to talk about something that we haven't talked about before now, is the greenwashing. Because I'm thinking about that because of the festivals. Like a lot of festivals today are saying that they're green or carbon neutral or stuff like that because they don't use plastic cups. But it's actually really nothing. And we are working right now with our carbon footprints at Le Périscope and thinking of the way that we can make more impact. Obviously, you cannot keep using plastic cups. That's logical stuff. But it's also, you have to work with the other concert venues and the artists. So if everyone is aware of the problematic and all the solutions, then we can actually do some more stuff. For example, an artist that has an exclusive contract with one venue to play just one concert in France is something that is not possible today. Like you cannot keep doing
exclusivity clauses.
Yeah, it cannot still work, that kind of stuff. So you have to work with other concert venues. So you have make more concerts in a more local place, and this way you lower your impact as to fly artists from the US, for example. Australia is so far away. So you work with other concert venues or festivals. They make more concerts, and also the audience travel less. Like it's something that is
smaller distances.
Yeah, it makes more sense to have a chain of actions, and the artist alone cannot do everything. The concert venue cannot do everything, and I think for it to work, we have to have political actions and
the structure.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. This is what we are trying to do within the Footprints project, is as well is to, as Pierre said, take off the pressure from artists who are, even more these days struggling because of the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, but to put them bigger pressure on networks and on governments to introduce the structures that we can function within in order to collectively reduce our ecological footprint. Yes.
I think what they announced with the European agency about the new rule for the new project to put some new taxes on the transport and everything, it's a good way, but it's the policies for all the economic system, and that's why it's important for us as a music sector to know our situation, because after that we will have to combine. It's the music sector. Our music sector is not a big thing in the European economy, so we have to know how we can be ready for these new rules, because they will arrive. And the first thing with the figures, once again, is that at one point you really have to use the carbon the carbon footprints as you use the money. You have the money and you have the carbon footprints. And if you do that through taxes or through other system, after you will think really differently with that for you're through for the train, for the choice of the way of doing things. Because at one point, for now, we are talking about ecological impact of our activities, but when we are talking with the tour manager and with the artist, we are talking only about money. So you have to put the footprints in front of the money at the same level, and after you can deal differently the thing day to day.
Yeah, and also the aim of this project is to introduce these tools and to present specific case studies with the numbers and with the tools to use later on by organizations and artists as well. So every tour that will be organized within the project will be calculated, and we will have to take into account different
and you will have some answers for the audience when the audience will ask you, okay, you arrive from a flight from Oslo, it's a big impact, but you say yes, but you and all the audience in the place with the car when you arrive to see the concert, it's also an impact. So what would you have to do? I can maybe come here to play, and maybe if you come in with bicycles, the impact will be balanced, and it's a choice after. But to do the choice, we need to have the right answers, not only the imagination of the artist killing the planet by flying, because I'm not sure the flights are plenty of musicians for the moment. We can calculate that too.
Yes. So any other questions from the audience? I think it's we can wrap up. Yes, Taish. Mm-hmm.
Thanks for the talk. It's very interesting and new to me as well. I thought of what Frank was talking about.
Do we have a mic, Jagoda?
I can speak louder.
Ah, okay.
What Frank was talking about in terms of venues in Benelux, for example, cooperating so artists can do an easier trajectory, because it obviously makes traveling easier. Is there any ideas or plans of doing that across the whole of Europe as well, and sort of having a touring trajectory?
Yes, but if you do that, I can be not really agree with kind of big system when you have only a few artists moving in the specific network. You have to apply for something and blah blah blah. What we can try is to have just to put a little footprints impact in our daily discussion with the tour manager. It just a little discussion. Okay, let's talk about why I want your artist. Let's talk about the money, and let's talk about the impact, the carbon impact. Just that could be. And after, of course, if we put that question in our discussions, the regulation will arrive naturally, because
Yeah, Nolab, you would like to add something?
Yeah, I mean, Good Music Company has made a green rider, and they're talking about how to deal with this and have the promoters to pay a little more for the artist to travel by train. So that's the way to do it. The problem is if you lose a day of work, it will cost too much. So to find a way around this is important, because the artists need the money to survive. So if you have to travel 2 days to get one job, that will be too expensive in the end. So we need subsidies to help out this. That's what we have done with the Art Council money on Oslo in Norway, that venues and festivals can ask for money to have artists to travel by train if they're going for a one-off to a festival, for instance.
Yeah, I think even Good Music is trying to get a card arranged by the railway companies in Europe for artists to travel in a cheap way by train.
Yeah, the old Europass idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I also emphasize that it's like an open discussion, because there are always two parts of the discussion when you approach like an organizer in a small city, and then you say that, okay, hotel needs to be in an eco network. We can have to take artists by electric cars only. So they are really, they emphasize that it's just a starting point for a discussion for us organizers to start thinking about the things that we can do to lower our impact.
And once again, don't forget that the audience travels is the highest impact in our music sector. So, okay, we can work on artist travels because we want to do the best way, but that's not the main problem.
And that's why, yes, we.
Like what's happening with museums, big exhibitions, if you buy a ticket for a museum, for a big exhibition, you get a discount or a free rail pass. That in the concert world is still very underused. I know there's one big concert organizer in Belgium, Ancien Belgique. If you buy a concert ticket for that venue and you have to come from Ghent, for example, you get a free or a discount rail ticket. And this is a system which we should negotiate with our national rail companies, and which could already help, especially if you're a big venue. I mean, probably for my venue, it's not so important for the Periscope because we don't have that big capacity where audience would travel from different cities to come and see that artist. But that's what we're also an intermediate. As a sector, we're intermediate in negotiating, in putting forward alternatives for other players within the same sector. But I think that could already, and also what Jan Olm was telling, putting pressure on our governments to implicate rules, like indeed with Japan, some of these travels, which are sometimes subsidized by our embassies, musicians travel to wherever to play concerts which are not really important, not for their career, not for audience development, but just as a show-off for national pride. And these things sometimes have a big, and I think we can make an impact there within the formal and the informal networks we have, and within, for example, the Footprints project that you're dealing with.
Yeah, that's why I was talking about the network and the importance that we can have, because I don't know everywhere in Europe, but I know in France we have several networks that are old and really work together, and we can actually make changes through our government to implement like rules, so every concert venue and every manager have to actually calculate their footprints would be the first step, because this way you have all the numbers from all the different artists, different concert venue, different festivals, and you can, well, you know, you can talk to your audience and you can actually make change. But it's why footprints, our project footprints is so important. It's this way we know from different point of view in Europe, from different kind of tours with different artists, we can actually share all that and give tools to people to actually do something about it.
Yeah, maybe to come back to the question of Thijs, we could develop a kind of a golden trail through Europe where you can, within the vicinity of, like, say, 200 kilometers from venue to venue, festival to festival. So you don't have to travel more than 200 kilometers and you don't lose a show day, and you can travel 14 days through a certain trail and visit all the countries as an artist.
And that's the difficulty coming to Norway, I'm afraid to say.
Yeah, maybe you can take a plane just in 1 or 2. If you end up all the way in south of Spain, you will maybe have to take a plane up north.
I mean, we have done a lot of cooperation with venues in Stockholm, in Copenhagen, and Gothenburg. So to when they are in the area, they have to play more shows. So that's what we are trying to do, and also in Norway, that we can have an artist play 4 or 5 shows in Norway. And the distance between the venues are so big that it's no competition. So that's so we do that quite regularly.
Yes, so I think we will wrap up slowly. If you have any other questions, we'll be here also drinking some coffee, still coffee and tea. Yeah, I think it's important to remember that although our improvised music sector might not be the one with the biggest ecological impact, but we are nested within a bigger system, and our experimentation can bring tools and can bring actual numbers that could be used by the bigger system, so that in the end we can influence that. It's also what we talked about yesterday. Our system, our industry is pretty creative and flexible and adaptable, so that's why we think in the project that this is in fact the right environment to introduce these changes, so that later we can also improvise the music, the bigger system of the music industry in general. So thank you to my panelists, and thank you for staying with